what Zelensky and his team are saying. The West must understand its responsibility for the murders of civilians in Donbass and other parts of Ukraine, where the Kyiv regime is using these weapons against the civilian population as a means of intimidation. This is state-sponsored terrorism.
The Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu says that Western countries providing Ukraine with military aid are looking to further fuel the crisis, but many weapons are ending up on the black market.
The collective West, hoping to prolong the conflict in Ukraine, continues large-scale shipments to the Kyiv regime. More than 28,000 tons of military cargo have already been delivered to the country. According to reports, some of the foreign weapons supplied by the West to Ukraine are spreading across the Middle East, as well as appearing on the black market.
Well, those words of the Russian Ministry of Defense were confirmed by the chief of the Ukrainian Bureau of Economic Security, who revealed that military aid has gone missing.
Humanitarian aid is sold for money. Today we have several such cases. Moreover, military aid is also sometimes sold for profit. We also determine such facts.
The fog of war is thickening around the fate of Western weapons dumped into Ukraine. The French Army General Staff even felt compelled to deny a rumor that Russian forces in Ukraine had captured 2 of the 6 French-made self-propelled Caesar howitzers that Paris delivered to Kyiv in mid-June.
There is nothing which confirms it. This information seems very unlikely, even implausible. The staff completely denies this information.
The speculation was fueled by a Twitter post by a politically active French lawyer, Régis de Castelnau, in which he claimed that the NATO weapons had ended up in the hands of Russian defense company. The company responded via telegram with tongue-in-cheek.
Hello, Mr. Regis. Please convey our thanks to President Macron for the donation of the self-propelled guns. This material is of course not tip-top, not like our MSTAS. But nevertheless, it will be useful. Send more, we'll take them down.
While Paris steadfastly denies that their weapons were captured, such a situation would obviously spell trouble for NATO, allowing for the careful study of its weapons by Russian engineers. Mystery around the fate of the Caesars persists, and some even speculate that they may have been sold to Russia. But one thing that we know for sure is that Interpol's Secretary General Jürgen Stock did warn last month to expect Western weapons to wind up in the wrong hands.
Criminal groups try to exploit these chaotic situations and the availability of weapons. We can expect an influx of weapons in Europe and beyond. We should be alarmed, and we have to expect these weapons to be trafficked not only to neighboring countries but to other continents.
And he's far from the only one to sound an alarm. A Canadian disarmament organization, Project Plowshares, had a similar warning that the weapons sent to Ukraine could end up anywhere due to the Ukrainian government's inability to control them.
There is the real threat that the Ukrainian government can potentially not control all of these weapons. They could end up anywhere. There is the real threat that the Ukrainian government can potentially not control all of these weapons. They could end up anywhere.
Still, that hasn't stopped Western officials from forging ahead with ever more pledges of weapons and funding. This week's Ukraine Recovery Conference in Lugano, Switzerland, was even rebranded from its previous identity of the Ukraine Reform Conference, as it was known since 2017. Clearly, the agenda has changed, and focusing on corruption in Ukraine is a little bit too inconvenient. But it would be even more inconvenient if corruption in Ukraine led to a lack of accountability over the whereabouts and use of Western financing and weapons. It's really not enough for Western officials to deny rumors and dismiss them as implausible. They have a moral responsibility in the interests of peace and stability to provide an accurate accounting of the whereabouts of the weapons and the resources that they provide Ukraine at any given time. During their next trip to Kyiv, they should be able to stand there with a newspaper that has today's date and in front of these weapons and say, hey guys, see, everything's good, they're right here. If only so their efforts don't blow back into all of our faces.
In other news, Beijing has slammed Washington for spreading disinformation. That's after the US ambassador to China accused Beijing of promoting, quote, Russian propaganda over the conflict in Ukraine.
I would hope that the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson would stop accusing NATO of starting this war. That's Russian propaganda.
It's the officials from the US who've been spreading disinformation and lies, not China. We always make objective and impartial judgments independently regarding the Ukraine issue and always stand on the side of peace and justice.
Moreover, Beijing has repeatedly called on the US to provide more information on American biolabs operating overseas. That's amid growing concerns of bioweapons development. Washington, however, has rejected those claims and went on to criticize China for refusing to condemn Russia over its offensive in Ukraine.
Thanks for watching. If you like our info, subscribe to channel and watch the next video.